Hi everyone, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and I've got a really spectacular game for you today. This was played in Athens back in 2004, and white was Grandmaster Dimitris Svitushkin, and black was Angelos Tsermiadianos. So Tsermiadianos is the brother of Andreas Tsermiadianos, who wrote a pretty well-received book on the Tarrasch French a couple of years ago, or maybe probably about 3 years ago by now. So he's rated about 2233, so, you know, a good player, but not as strong as his brother. So the brother who wrote the book on the French is a middle-level IM, if I recall correctly, whereas Angelos T, to abbreviate his last name, so Angelos is, like a near FIDE Master strength player. Certainly a player with his ups and downs. So I found out about this game when I went to Greece last year, so I was visiting some people there, some of my people, and got to meet him at the I think it's Pagration Club in Athens, and very, very nice guy. So I had a great time, played some blitz against him, and hung around with some of the officers of the club there, and just had a really nice evening. Anyway, while I was there, he told me about this great game he played. So he didn't have it memorized, but certainly told me who it was against, and I looked it up, and yeah, it's a fantastic game. So I'm happy to share this with you now. And it's the tactics in this are really nice, and I think you'll enjoy it and get a good workout out of it as well if you try to figure things out for yourself. Okay, so Angelos had black and played the Budapest. So it's a very fun opening. Probably not 100% correct, but I don't know that white gets a clear advantage with best play. So, I think it's certainly playable. Worst comes to worst, you have a little bit of an inferior position, but nothing too terrible. And as we see, I mean, you get some chances to whack even extremely strong players. Svitushkin's rating in this game, at the time of this game, was 2568, which is a very impressive rating. And he just gets blown off the board with the tactics. So he manages to hang on and lose an endgame, but anyway, we'll see what happens. So d takes e5, knight to g4, and now knight f3. Okay, bishop to f4 is the other main line, and this leads to, or often leads to this very much more positional approach after bishop to b4 check, knight to d2. Knight c3 is possible as well. Okay, I think this is the better line. All right, knight to c6, knight f3, queen e7, and then white has a choice between a3, forcing this trade quickly, not immediately. Black has this standard little trick here with knight g takes e5, the point being that, let's say, takes and takes. If a takes b4, well-known blunder, black gives checkmate like this. So white plays e3. And now black has to make the exchange. I mean, he could play bishop to d6, but that's not very appealing. I think white can just play knight to e4 then. And any other move would allow the bishop to get trapped by b4 and then c5. So bishop d2, queen d2, and so on. So that's one line. Second line is to play the immediate e3, hoping to do without the a3 move. So here too, okay, knight g takes e5. Whoops. Knight takes e5, knight e5, bishop e2. A3 would, of course, transpose. And then here black can play any number of things. But he can try to keep the bishop alive in various ways. So the question is whether it's better for white to just force this bishop to be exchanged or to try to play against it. Anyway, I don't really want to go into the theory of that, but that's just some basic, very entry-level information. Okay, so knight f3 is the move in the game. Bishop c5, e3, knight c6, and now white played a3. And I'm not really a big fan of this move for white because it encourages black to play a5, which is a move that he wants to play, at least if he wants to get this so-called Dreimer rook or Dreimer attack into play, with a subsequent rook a6 and then the rook swinging over to g6 or h6 for in the hopes of creating all kinds of attacking mayhem. So knight c3, castles, bishop e2, rook e8. Yeah. Black should never be in a rush to take this e-pawn, so you only take it when you're forced to, when you've got nothing better to play. Okay, well here, white played knight to d4. And this takes the game in a slightly different tack, so you don't get to see this the rook lift here. So I'll show you very quickly a game with that rook lift. So castles, knight g to e5, b3, takes, knight e5, bishop e2. So we could have gotten there and moved faster by white taking on e5 instead. Anyway, and now rook to a6. And here black is already significantly better, and after knight g3, rook h6, black is just winning. So this was a rapid game I played against Bisguyer back in '98, and the game didn't go much longer. So I had black here. Knight h5, d6, just threatening to play knight to g4. If white plays h3, then of course I just take. And here's just a sample of how that can finish. And that's pretty convincing. Black's up 2 pawns with crushing attack and more material on the way. So instead of h6, Bisguyer played f4, which is just as bad. Takes, knight to g4, rook f3, and here I thought about, I played this, and here I thought about bishop takes h3, which is probably even better. There was a move that I missed in my calculation, but it's fine. You can work that out on your own. It is the best move, but queen takes f2, which I played, was fine, and in fact, Bisguyer just resigned here. So, that gives you an idea of this rook lift, how that's supposed to work. So Sviatushkin avoided it, though, with knight to d4. And the point is that black can't play knight c takes e5, and since he can't do that, since he's got to play knight g takes e5, well, the knight on c6 blocks the rook lift up and over. On the other hand, the knight on d4, okay, it at least invites the black queen to the h4 square, so maybe it has its drawbacks too. So castles. Now, in a game played the year before, the one we're looking at now, so in 2003, where Sviatushkin again had white, his opponent played bishop to f8, and then after f4, bishop to d3, and then f5 and f6. He certainly enjoyed a much more pleasant position and beat his opponent in another Greek tournament. Actually, this was a couple of years before, in 2002. So it was Sviatushkin against Litsus, who was only 21.53, so outrated by, at that point, 300 points in Ikaros 2002. Okay, so our hero of the day, Tsirmiadianos, played d6. Now, the usual move here is knight to d5, which looks like a better choice. It's something that white probably wants to play anyway, given that he wants to achieve rook to b1 at some moment. Though, okay, rook to b1, which is the move played, has that same intent in mind. But the other advantage to knight to d5, well, there's two other advantages to knight to d5. So like rook to b1, it prepares b4. Unlike it, it keeps black at least having to think about this pawn on c7, so the queen can't go on excursions to h4 right away. And secondly, there's also the defensive possibility of bringing the knight back to f4 if need be to help cover some squares over there. Okay, well in the game, instead, Sviatushkin played rook to b1. Oh, I should say that also f4 is playable, as we saw in the Sviatushkin-Litsus game. And it's an idea, it's a general attacking thrust that's been used by both Vasily Smyslov and Boris Spassky. Okay, so rook to b1 was played, queen h4, with the usual evil intentions. And here, white has to already start being kind of careful. Rybka, at least the version of Rybka that I was using at the time, comes up with knight d to b5, and is just not concerned about black's attacking prospects. And it looks like white is maybe a little bit better, but it's very complicated. So rook e6, so black doesn't care either. f4, rook h6, h3, and I mean, this is just a great mess. Something like this might be best. Rook to g6, threatening to take on h3, and also threatening to take even on g2. Queen e1. Now, if queen h3, queen f2, and the problem is that black has too many things that are hanging, so probably the best is rook takes g2, queen h3. Okay, now, king f2 doesn't work because of the queen on e1, so king g1, knight g4, threatening queen h2 mate. And, alright, crazy position. White is up a rook for 2 pawns, but black has an attack. He's threatening the rook on b1 as well. Prepared to maybe play rook to e8. So, very interesting position. Of course, also have this. And so after all of these checks and finally captures, we have this weird position where black has 4 pawns for the knight, but the c-pawn is going to drop because of rook c8, just knight to d5. So I would imagine this probably, well, I don't even know if I want to say that this should be a draw. I'm really not. I would still think that's the most likely result, but it's just a very messy position. Okay, so that's a sample of what could happen. In our game, Svetoshkin played the move g3, and of course, Tyrmiandianos played queen h3. And now we can see why it would be better if white had played knight to d5 instead of rook to b1. Namely, white could play knight to f4 here and evict the queen. Okay, well here, what should white do? It's a very funny position here. So the most obvious move here, or I think the most obvious move, is the one that Svetoshkin played. And it's knight to d5. But this is in fact a mistake. And the peculiar reason why this is a mistake, well, okay, I don't even want to say it. So try to figure out everything as best as you can at this point, and then I'll give you a hint, and then I'll show you what actually happened. Okay, well, knight to d5 looks fantastic. It hits c7, prepares to go to f4. As I said, it's a mistake. And now I'll give you the hint as to why it's a mistake, or one particular reason. And it's kind of odd, but the tactical point, or one of the tactical points, is that the e2 square, where this bishop is sitting, is now insufficiently defended. So there's a hint, and I'll let you again try to figure out what the winning combination is. So take your time, and I'll show you in a moment. Okay, well, I hope you've been trying to figure it out, and you stopped the recording and did your best. In fact, black has 2 very good moves here. The one that he didn't play, but is also really nice, is bishop takes d4, e takes d4. Okay, see if you can figure it out from here. Knight takes d4. Okay, you might not see the point of this yet. I mean, obviously it's a nice move to make if you can get away with it, but queen takes d4. Now what? Well, the answer is queen takes f1 check. So spectacular blow. All right, if bishop takes f1, knight f3 check simply regains the queen, and then black is just up material and doing fine. So king g2, knight takes, and black is up the exchange and a pawn. So that's completely hopeless for white. If king takes f1, well, bishop to h3 check. If king to e1, knight f3 check, and the queen is regained, and again, black ends up the exchange and a pawn ahead. And if king to g1, what do we do? Of course, it's knight f3 check. Bishop takes f3, otherwise, again, black's up material, and rook to e1 mate. So, beautiful combination, and yet it's only one of the 2 ways that black can go. So instead, Tyrmiandianos came up with knight takes d4, e takes d4, knight to g4. So very natural. Okay, nothing spectacular yet. Bishop g4, bishop g4. Okay, so white to move here, and it's a little bit tough. Okay, if you play, remember, you got to, of course, save your queen, but you also don't want to allow bishop to f3, followed by queen to g2 mate. So that reduces the options considerably to really just 3. There's queen to b3, there's queen to d3, and there's the pawn to f3. Okay, what do we do? Okay, move number 1 is queen to d3. The problem with this is bishop to e2. If queen to b3, well, then it's our other friend, queen takes f1 check, bishop h3, and rook to e1 checkmate. Okay, so the move chosen by Svetoshkin in the game is simply f3. Oh, there is one other move, of course, knight to f4. All right, if knight to f4, I believe the solution is to just take, and then bishop c2, and then bishop takes d4. So maybe this is the best that white can do, but it's still pretty miserable too. Black is up a pawn with a dominating position. So maybe there's something even better, but this is at least very, very good for black. Okay. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to go so far back. So now f3 was the move that was chosen in the game. All right, well, what's the big idea for black now? Okay, bishop takes d4 check. And this isn't so hard to see because if queen takes d4, there's rook e2. And that is what I was talking about when I said that the e2 square was insufficiently protected after white played knight to d5. So very clever. And of course now if queen f2, well, we can just take the queen, or you could play the flashy and even stronger bishop takes f3. Okay, if rook to f2, then rook e1 and its mate next move. Okay, a better move is bishop to e3, but we just take and play rook a to e8, and black is a pawn up with a dominating position again. So this is simply winning for black. All right, but Svetoshkin found a different move. He played king to h1. And at first glance, this looks pretty good because, okay, we're threatening this bishop, we're threatening this bishop, we're threatening knight takes c7, and maybe knight to f4 as well. When the queen is almost trapped, okay, you can go back to h6, but then there might be some good knight discovery after that. So it looks at first glance as if black has gone a little bit too far. So what was Angelos' big idea here? Okay, and he had to have foreseen this when he played knight takes d4. Otherwise, this was just a happy accident. Well, here's what it is, and it's kind of reminiscent of the famous old Rotlevi-Rubinstein game. So he plays queen takes f1 check, queen takes f1, and now rook e1. Absolutely beautiful, with the point that on queen takes e1, bishop takes f3 is checkmate. So here white had to start coughing up material with bishop to e3. Bishop takes f3 check, king to g1, and now black to move. Let's land the finishing blow here. How do we put an end to white's resistance? Well, the move chosen in the game was certainly good enough to win. So black played rook takes f1, bishop takes d5, and after bishop d4, bishop c4, he was up 3 pawns. And although white put up pretty good resistance the rest of the way, and looked occasionally like black made his life a little bit more difficult than necessary, he was still able to bring home the full point. So you can, I'm sure, look up the rest of the game in the databases. I won't go over it, but I'll zip through it really quickly. But let's go back to here, and let's see what the best move was. Okay, the answer is rook takes e3, and although, well, actually, you know, the funny thing is, black is already up material in this position, so he's not even down anything. I mean, it's a goofy material imbalance. I mean, white's got a queen and a knight, but in return, black has a rook, 2 bishops, and 2 pawns. So the equivalent of a pawn up, but he's winning more as well. So this is in fact just a resignable position for white here. So that would have been just a beautiful culmination. It would have ended the game quickly, and would have been fantastic. So in the game, okay, it was a lot more work, but he did manage to bring home the full point. Okay, so here, white could have tried rook c4, and all right, here again, black's up 3 pawns, but you know the d pawns are a little bit weak, so a little bit of work there. Anyway, Svetoshkin retreated, and okay, slowly he tries to make some progress. Okay, now he's up 4 pawns, which is usually enough to win, even with opposite colored bishops. Okay, down to 3 pawns again, but black has activated his king. And you know, it has to be said that black's king is a bit awkward, but he's finding ways of making progress. So it always looks a little bit clumsy, but he's doing the job. Now here the best would have been just d5 and rook e6, activating his rook. And then this check is nice. If king takes, well, it's the only move. Then rook to d2 and wins the bishop. And this position here is in fact a Zugzwang. Okay, white has to keep his rook on the A file, so there's no b4, a b check. But the rook can't go to a8 because then d4 check and bishop takes a8, and he can't go to a6 because the rook would hang. And the bishop doesn't want to move because it either allows d4 or g3. So this is a simpler win. But okay, rook to c5, which is kind of clever, is also fine. I mean, if bishop takes, then black takes the rook over here. And after bishop d6, bishop d5, white's in Zugzwang again. So we tried rook to a7, and now the rook is active. And this is actually kind of scary looking for a second. I mean, white is threatening checkmate. I mean, what nerve? But Triandianos has this under control. So rook to c5 check. Good move. So if white takes the rook, then black has just way too many pawns for white to cope with. So he will retreated. And again, this is kind of frightening. Okay, threatening mate in one once again. But black has a nice way of finishing the game. So see if you can figure out what it is. And then also see if you can figure out what what black absolutely should not do. So black to move and win, solve that, and solve for what black really, 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 really should not do. But it looks good at first. Okay, so I hope you did it. If you didn't, you have one last chance to stop the recording before I give you the answer. Okay, so first we'll start off with what black to move should not do, and that's rook c1 check. And this looks really good at first, but okay, king takes b2, that's the idea. And now king c2, very important. Bishop to e4 check, king c3. And now if you make a queen, well, you get checkmated. Okay, you can make a knight, but then it should probably be a draw. And there's not really anything else to do. I mean, the threat of the bishop moving and giving checkmate is too serious. So rook c1 is not the answer. Okay, rook to b2 check is good. And after king c1, what do? Rook to b1 check. See, the difference this time is that the white king isn't going to make it to c3. So, for instance, if king takes, then check, and queen. And now the black king is not locked in. The newly promoted queen is on a light square, so there's no meaningful bishop discovered check, and so black would win. So after rook to b1, Spatushkin tried king to d2, but after b2 resigned. So again, the king is going to get out to b3, and if king to c3, then rook to c1 check. So again, the king is driven away, black's king will have a flight square on the b file, and that's game over. So, fantastic game by black. Okay, he could have finished it quite a bit earlier, but still, beautiful combination, and some very nice little tactics at the end too. So, definitely a game to be proud of, and yeah, I would have been happy to have played this game. Although I hope I would have played rook takes e3, but that would have been just the perfect cap on this. But still, very, very nice game by him. And one that I certainly hope you enjoyed. So thanks a lot, everybody, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.